Our subscribers get it, with exclusive access to breaking news, briefs, reactions, opinion, and process. iPolitics. Are you up for it?
Hi, and welcome to part 3 of iPolitics Hot Topics panel on innovation. I'm Ian Shelton, Deputy Editor at iPolitics. With me are Rob Rosenfeld from U15, Andre Albinati from Earnscliffe, and Rob Annan from Mitacs. Now, in the previous parts of this discussion, we discussed what is innovation, why is it important, and frankly, why we're not doing so well at it. In this part, we want to get into a bit of how do we solve that, and how do we convince governments to make the necessary investments in innovation. Maybe I'll start off with Andre. When you are meeting with industry, or you're meeting with the public sector or government itself, what are the solutions to innovation that are being punted about?
From the perspective of the private sector?
Yeah.
So I guess there's a couple of things for private sector as they look at innovation, and ultimately it depends whether you're looking at, well, it's actually true, I shouldn't say that, whether you're a multinational or small, medium-sized business in Canada looking to export your goods abroad or markets. Market predictability is absolutely imperative to any company, both in terms of where they invest in research and development, and where they put boots on the ground in manufacturing capacity and so forth, depending on what they're doing, or providing a service within a jurisdiction. So one of the ways to create predictable environments for business in which business can invest and operate is to ensure that rules are clear, that they're efficient, and that that companies can have a certain predictability as it attaches to regulatory regimes or legislation and so forth. So one of the ways in which to do that is to look at free trade agreements. So Canada is doing that on a range of fronts. Both the Canada-EU trade agreement that the government is close to finalizing and looking at implementing, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and then there are a series of bilateral agreements as well that Canada is looking at. Within those agreements are a range of things, everything from procurement transparency, which quite frankly is a good thing because it gets rid of, it helps to strip out corruption and other things. So Canadians should be, supportive of that. Strong intellectual property supports, which for the pharmaceutical industry, for example, intellectual property protection is it's sort of table stakes for them in terms of where they invest. If their IP is stripped from them when they move into a jurisdiction and are doing a lot of research in that jurisdiction for no reason from their perspective, then that's a problem because their entire model is based on high risk upfront costs and clinical trial research, followed by a period of time in which they can work at recouping that cost. So I would say that's those are some of the things that they look at.
And actually, just moving a bit off that note on pharmaceutical, Rona Ambrose was asked recently whether maybe the budget would have some room for innovation in the health field. Now, her response to that was that there are enough collaborations between the private sector and government, and there's enough money in that system already to do the job. Do you feel that's the case? Is there enough money in terms of incentives?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, listen, it's up to governments to determine how much they actually spend, and what that dollar amount is. And, overall, I think Canada, whether it's been liberal governments or conservative governments, quite frankly, have looked at ensuring that they're investing the right sort of dollars into health research and into the larger research enterprise. So, there might be some concern about that. I guess for me, what I would say is that there are opportunities in time, though, that governments can take. And if I had I'm less concerned about the budget coming up because I think it'll be an austerity budget, and I think that there are some investments, yes, that already have been made. But if I look back and look at opportunities missed, perhaps, around the global recession, that Canada had an opportunity to invest in longer-term growth-related, research-intensive investments. And many countries around the world did. Many of our competitors did. South Korea, for example, put a great deal of money into clean technology research. And so that will likely catapult their technologies ahead of other countries, which means that they will be able to provide new products globally, and they'll be driving that wave and benefiting from it. Their economy will be. Canada chose to do shovel-ready projects and spent a great deal of money on that. And there were a few exceptions. The Knowledge Infrastructure Fund, for example, or program KIP, I believe it was called, was perhaps an exception to that. But we're now faced with having to pay down that stimulus spending as opposed to reaping sort of the benefits of it sort of 10 years down the road. So it's a short-term hit that, yes, it might help psychologically with the population during a period of time, but it doesn't have long-term impacts for the economy.
And I think that's a point that I think I've discussed with each of you before, is that there is a certain amount of tension between the long-term timescales of innovation and the sort of short-term demands of the electoral cycle. Rob, you're someone who has to pitch projects to the government on a fairly regular basis. How do you talk to them about recognizing the value of these long-term investments, which might not deliver short-term political gain?
Because we've been making long-term investments in research for quite a while now, through a suite of programs that the government's put forward, both the Tri-Councils, CFI, more recently CERC, Banting, Vanier is the retention of best and brightest from around the world. They have had the benefit of making announcements from the products of those research investments that had perhaps been made by previous, and have begun getting the getting the benefit for investments they had made when they first came in. So the understanding is there. The question is to be able to put it onto a context where there is an understanding of what the return on investment is going to be and the applicability behind it as well. But there is a large amount of understanding within government about what's happening here. With the suite of programs that have been developed, the Tri-Councils, CFI, the Indirect Cost Program, and a variety of others, we've built a good car. And we've been putting money into it for fuel to keep it going. But a lot of other people, our competitors, have been investing more money recently into theirs, and they are catching up to us or passing us right now. And from the university's perspective, and from the colleges as well, the ability for us to be able to continue participating in this great innovative process requires a continued, if not greater, investment into what we've been doing over here. And sort of to give you an example of the three ways in which we are contributing to innovation or are directly involved in it is our ability to engage in international partnerships. So a lot of our universities have bilateral and multilateral agreements with their counterparts overseas, whether they're universities or research-intensive centers. That allows us to bring in the best upcoming research, like sort of state-of-the-art processes, into the Canadian marketplace that otherwise may not necessarily have been available, or certainly some of the new discoveries that allow and increase the standard of living and the quality of life of Canadians. It's the retention and attraction of the best talent of people, and this is something which my colleague Rob can speak to as well, because we are now in a far more competitive field to get the best and brightest researchers and students out there. And Canadian economy depends on international students. Like, it's something recently that was recognized by the government in the launch of the International Education Strategy, but it's going to be something that's going to require a significantly greater amount of investments going forward and collaboration from all of us. The countries that we used to take the best and brightest from have figured it out and are now instituting policies to keep those people there and begun coming to our doorstep and taking people. So we really, if we want to remain competitive and innovative, then we really need to kick it up a notch when it goes to getting these people and retaining them. And I think the third is going to be knowledge translation. It's bringing business to the table and going, okay, it's not so much push, it's got to be pull. You've got to tell us what you want. You've got to work with us in this process. You've got to hire the people that we graduate here so that we ensure that we continue to remain an effective, competitive economic system.
And actually, you've kind of set this up rather nicely for me, but we're talking about the relationship between private sector and business, public sector and business, but the third side to that triangle is the public sector and private sectors. And maybe, Rob, do you want to talk about how do we get those two entities working together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I mean, obviously the innovation challenge is complex, but I do think that there's a real advantage in leveraging the strength that we have in our universities, for instance, to help address some of the challenges we're having. And if we go back to the first segment we did in this series. And we talked about innovation as ideas being applied in novel ways. I really feel like by bringing the private sector or other non-academic actors together with the public sector, you have right there. You have the idea generators in the universities, and then you have the applicators in the private sector or in the non-academic sector. And so at Mitacs, this is really where we've grown up doing this. And I'll just provide maybe an example of how, when you bring these pieces together, you get new ideas that can be very innovative. So several years ago at Mitacs, one of the staff was speaking with a fellow in Vancouver who had a roofing company. And he, they got talking, and he maintained that he had no research component to being a roofer. But it turned out, actually, after some discussion, that he actually had a significant business problem. He found it very difficult to estimate the amount of roofing materials one needs for a lot of these new modern roofs. They're very complex, and it's not obvious sort of how to make very accurate estimates, which leads to either underestimates, in which case he loses money, or overestimates when he loses the contract. And so he had what he thought of as a business problem, not a research problem. But the Mitacs staff actually said, well, you know what, that's a research problem, and connected this roofer with someone in the mathematics department at UBC. And that mathematician came up with algorithms that were able to essentially take photographs of the roof, turn them into three-dimensional models, and give very accurate estimates of the material. Well, the roofer worked with the mathematician and developed software, and that roofer now actually sells that software as roofing software. So here you had an example of someone in industry working who didn't even recognize a potential research challenge, but by going into the universities and bringing something that was a real problem for him, was able to leverage that research strength. The researchers found that it was a really interesting project to work on, and both parties were really happy with the outcome. And then, of course, it's good for the roofer, for the economy. So it's, I think, a really good example of how we can have collaboration across the sectors to help drive innovation.
That's a great example. And when you hear things like that, we come back to the question of, okay, well, if we can manage to do that, and we are managing to do that, then why are we still sort of falling behind on so many measures of innovation? And we discussed a fair bit of that in the second part. But with that in mind, with the idea that we can make those connections, we can find those people and put them together, what is the missing link here, and what do we need to be asking government to step in and do? What is their role there? Andre, I'll go with you on this.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that's of interest to me is this notion of what the cultural identity is of a corporation or a business model and so forth. And I get it's a Peter Drucker quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So that kind of entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurial sort of spirit, looking at issues in new ways, increasingly, and it's also been said there's a couple of mega trends out there that will force business and governments to deal with this anyways, right? So, I think previously I talked about, for example, antimicrobial resistance, and so we won't have the use of antibiotics for a while. So, that sort of innovation that's required for that. But that there's a couple of key trends. One, an aging population is going to put pressures on because we're going to lose part of our labor force. So how companies adapt to that, I think, will force governments to also address with components of that. I think disruptive technologies, so personalized health. I think previously as well we talked about Minister Rona Ambrose and the health agenda. Well, she is actually investing in personalized health, and through Genome Canada and CIHR and so forth, those are disruptive technologies that will change how healthcare is delivered and what the expectations are. But it's the same thing through stem cell networks and so forth. So that will create new businesses, new policies, and new ways in which things like healthcare and policies are delivered. So I think those are a couple of ways in which the organizations will be forced to change and adapt regardless.
I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to once again extol the virtues and strengths of the public education element, the public sector education element. We have research strengths in Canada, and research strengths that are directly tied to industries that we have over here, and those need to be supported. We need to focus on providing funding to the whole spectrum of both skills and talent creation, training, integration within industry, but also on major sort of research initiatives to promote those strengths that we have that are identified by institution across this country. We need to provide opportunities for funding to take advantage of new and emerging technologies, which has been recognized by a series of government reports, whether it's going to be nanotechnology or innovations in ICT or in life sciences. We have strength in those areas. In other cases, physics as well. We have a number of institutes across this country that are doing some leading cutting-edge stuff on that type as well. We have to be able to put resources aside so that we remain competitive when it comes to the attraction of people over here. And so the industry takes the benefit, and as does our research base, of having best practices, of new techniques, of new innovative approaches globally coming in here and providing our students with the mobility to go out and study and come back and bring it in over here. And I think we need to increase the amount of resources available for our institutions to engage in those types of partnerships with those foreign entities that are doing the leading edge stuff abroad, because there are some strength areas we're not going to have. So why don't we collaborate with the ones that do? So we're not going to be left out of it. So we can apply that extra effort to bring it over to Canada and apply it to our issues, to some of our problems over here.
Okay. I think we'll leave it there, but I would be remiss a week before the budget not to ask for your personal prediction on what we're going to see on Tuesday. So maybe we'll go down the line from Rob at the end.
I suspect we're not going to see a whole lot, but I have my fingers crossed that this government will recognize the value of it, investing in innovation, and we may see a few interesting targeted investments in that area.
Andre?
Well, I hope Rob is right. Listen, I think Minister Flaherty has, has been very good, quite frankly, at investing in innovation. I think he understands the challenges that Canada faces and has sought ways in which to invest in those areas. I think this is an austerity budget, though. I mean, I think the government has been clear on that. I think that they want to hit, their budget targets and have a clean slate going into the election in 2015. So, an old Paul Martin aphorism used to be, come hell or high water. And I think that short of Flaherty saying that, which he wouldn't, but that's what they're targeting. So that means there's more pain to come. Additional cuts to be made, and very little new spending to be had in this budget, which is why it's being launched right in the middle of the Sochi Olympics. So, yeah.
I'm not going to disagree whatsoever to my two esteemed colleagues. I think that we may see the introduction of a framework going forward for innovation and science, and I don't think it's going to be tied only to the budget, because we've seen several announcements preceding the budget that have dramatic implications when it comes to supporting innovation or consultations that are occurring beforehand, and I think we'll see some afterwards. So I think the budget will contain a general direction that the government hopes to take when it comes to supporting innovation, science, and excellence, and then we'll be following up later on with either investments or more details after it's had an opportunity to speak to the community.
Thanks very much. Well, that's it for part 3 of the iPolitics Hot Topics panel on innovation. With me are Rob Rosenfeld from U15, Andre Albinati from Earnscliffe Strategy Group, and Rob Annan from Mitacs. If you decide to skip the women's hockey and actually tune into the budget next week, we'll be having live coverage on the site at ipolitics.ca. Thanks very much.